Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
The court case between the legislature and Governor Dayton got underway this week. We'll hear the arguments and also talk with Senate leadership about the disagreements and accomplishments of the 2017 session. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. The clash between Governor Dayton and lawmakers over the governor's line item vetoed to defund the legislature is now before the court. Joining me in the studio to provide his point of view on that controversy and the work accomplished in the 2017 legislative session is the Senate Minority Leader Tom Bakk. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Attorneys representing Governor Dayton and the legislature were in court this week. What is your point of view on this controversy?
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation. I think the legislature was kind of left with no choice when their budget was line itemed out. So it'll be interesting to see what the court does, because there really are kind of two conflicting constitutional provisions. One says there's a separation of powers and none of the three branches can coerce each other. And then there's the conflicting provision that says the governors have line item veto over legislative appropriations. So how the courts are going to remedy that, what conclusion they'll come to it, I think it'll be kind of interesting case history.
What would be the ideal outcome from your point of view? A special session to put funding back in, or renegotiate the tax bill, or where do you stand on that?
Well, I was pleased that the court did give us a reprieve until October so we can continue to talk about it. I think the question, the governor's raised a very legitimate issue on the size of the tax bill. And, you know, all the other bills were negotiated out. There were policy provisions that the governor didn't really like, but he was able to get a little additional money, and he decided to accept some of those provisions in the public safety bill and in the education bill. He now would like to revisit those things, but that's hard to unravel, because in the negotiations there was discussion about policy and money, and things were traded back and forth. The tax bill is the one bill where there really was not a global agreement on how much to spend. And the last night of session I publicly called for the governor to veto the bill. I'm disappointed that he didn't. I understand why he didn't. He was worried about funding at the Department of Revenue for the state employees over there. But it's going to be difficult to get the bill opened up. I think the only way that the Republicans in the legislature are likely to consider is if our revenue collections continue to fall under the February budget forecast. And they are right now. I mean, February through May, our revenue's down by, I think, around $126 million below the forecast. So if we were putting the state budget together today rather than last spring, we'd be spending $126 million or even less than we spent in the current budget. So we'll see how the collections start to come in here for the months of June, July, and August. We'll have all those numbers by the time the 1st of October comes around. And if revenue keeps going south, we're going to have to find some revenue someplace and reopen something. I actually suggested at the last meeting the four leaders had with the governor that if people didn't want to reopen the tax bill, maybe we could reopen the transportation bill, because we haven't used general fund money for roads and bridges until this session. And we spent $300 million on transportation of general fund money in this biennium that we're now going to go into, but that escalates to about $448 million in the next biennium. So one of the suggestions I made was, if we're not going to reopen the tax bill, let's think about the transportation bill and just acknowledge that if revenue continues to go south, we got to find some savings somewhere in the next biennium, because I don't think any of us want to hand off to the next governor and the next legislature after the 2018 election a budget that's not in balance. So I think our success before October 1st, I think, is probably predicated on how revenue collections come in over the next 3 months.
Well, Governor Dayton continually stressed his concern for maintaining budget stability in the future, and that's sort of what you're talking about. So what was accomplished this session in terms of budget stability?
Well, the governor and the Republicans both agreed to some things that I didn't support. the early health care rebate that was done in January, the 25% premium reduction.
The reinsurance part?
No, the earlier one,
Oh,
the rebate,
okay, the
the
first
25% rebate, was a poorly crafted plan. And it seems like the administration or the Republicans were unwilling because they felt some urgency because of the premium hikes to just do something. And it wasn't means tested at all, so somebody making millions of dollars a year are going to get their health care premiums reduced by 25%. Not necessary. So it was, and then, so that was one of the challenges. It wasn't means tested in any way. And the other was they took $350 million or so out of the state's budget reserve to pay for it. Well, it was the Senate in 2014 that created the budget reserve mechanism we have today, that were in November, if there's a budget surplus, a third of any surplus automatically goes to our reserve. That was the Senate provision that we did in 14, Senator Skoye and myself, and we felt very strongly about building a strong budget reserve for when the next recession comes. So when the first bill that we send out takes money out of the budget reserve, that was concerning to me. And then the reinsurance plan that was done to essentially try and expand access, to get insurance companies to look at some markets, some counties that they're not in right now in the exchange, for the state to buy down some of the risk in the individual insurance market. That was paid for with $400 million out of the Healthcare Access Fund. The money that supports the Healthcare Access Fund is sunsetting in 2019. So that was $400 million. So that money's not going to be there going forward to continue that program. And then they took $142 million of general fund. So that total was $542 million. The governor let that bill become law rather than vetoed. He let it become law without his signature. I actually called him the night before he did that and asked him to veto that bill also, because I don't know where we're going to find $542 million 2 years from now. If the program turns out to be a success and access to health care is expanded and it helps with premiums, we're going to want to continue that. But how do we do that when it was, when the first time, this time, was done with one-time money? So I think there should have been some kind of an assessment on healthcare providers or insurance companies to pay for that, not a pot of money that's going to go away.
So perhaps something to bring up next session?
Well, probably not in an election year. I don't think the House is going to be willing to do that, to raise any kind of new revenue in an election year. So those were the two pieces I think that probably weren't well crafted or not thought through well enough.
You were satisfied with the progress this session?
Other than that, I think it was a pretty good session. I mean, we put a bunch of new money into K-12, 2% and 2% on the formula, and some additional $50 million into early childhood funding. So overall, I think it was a pretty good session from a spending standpoint. It's just that the tax bill was a little bit too big and might lead us to future deficits.
You are known as a pro-labor lawmaker. How would you rate this session for labor interests?
Difficult. They found themselves very much on defense. And I think the governor fought off most of the things that labor would have felt were egregious. I helped with some of that on the last night in the state government bill. There was a really troubling provision for the state's public employees that I was able to negotiate out of the bill after the governor had included it in the bill negotiated with the Republicans. But Education Minnesota feels a little bit nicked up because of some teacher licensure provisions that the governor negotiated that he now would like to revisit, I think, when he's given it a little bit of thought. But overall, thanks to the governor, the preemption issue, limiting the authority of local governments to do things over and above the state law in the area of working conditions, the governor vetoed that. That was probably a pretty big win for labor. So I think maybe, other than maybe that couple provisions in the education bill, I think labor came out of the session okay. The trades, I think, are probably especially happy with a bunch of new money going into transportation, roads and bridges, construction, and a $995 million bonding bill is going to put a lot of people to work.
Absolutely. If you were addressing a group of middle-income Minnesotans, what accomplishments would you underline? What can they be happy about?
Depends on where you go. I think if you're out in agricultural country, the provision in the tax bill that provides for a tax credit to buy down school operating levies is a really, really big deal out in ag country. If you're in one of the northern counties that have a lot of public land, there's some additional money in the payment in lieu of taxes that's paid on public land to counties to buy down the property tax burdens. So I think it depends on where you go. If you're somebody with a young family, you're probably happy about the additional funding for early childhood. So that overall, there's geographically, I think everybody can feel like they probably had some benefits of the session.
One last question for you. One area of the state budget that's expected to continue to grow into the future is Health and Human Services. What are your thoughts on how the state's going to tackle that problem?
You know, it's a problem in more than just Minnesota. I mean, you see they're working on it in Washington, D.C. You know, we have a society that's graying. And the older you get, the more your healthcare costs go up. And there are just more and more of us moving into those final years where you're going to be much larger utilizers of the healthcare system. So those costs are going to continue to grow. And we're going to have to figure out how we get our arms around it. And the one place I think we need federal action is something needs to happen with the cost of prescription drugs. I believe that prescription drugs are about over 20% of the cost of your health care insurance now. I think that's a place where we could use some price controls. And I know the pharmaceutical companies will hate that, and it may have some impact on research on new drugs, but those costs just keep continuing to rise just exponentially. And all I have to do is watch TV. Anybody will tell you, you see all the advertising being done for drugs that we've never ever heard of. Now, it's definitely a contributing factor in longevity, but there's a lot of prescription drugs being developed all the time, and we're going to have to get our arms around the cost of it.
Senator Bakk, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Attorneys representing the Minnesota Legislature and Governor Mark Dayton each made their case before a Ramsey County District Court judge this week. At issue is the constitutionality of the governor's line-item veto of legislative funding, a move the governor made in an attempt to reopen negotiations over tax cuts and other policies.
We are here because on May 30th of 2017, the governor effectively eliminated the Senate and House as functioning bodies by vetoing all funding for the core of the legislative branch for the next 2 years. So we have brought a declaratory judgment action asking this court to declare the vetoes null and void. The governor did not veto these appropriations because he objected to the appropriation. In fact, his budget proposal proposed the exact same amount. He vetoed these provisions to coerce the legislature into concessions on unrelated provisions, some not even having anything to do with appropriations, that he had already signed into law. Make no mistake about it, Your Honor, we are at an impasse. The governor has said, I will call the special session only if you agree to concede on the following 5 items. My client has said we are not going to negotiate while we have a gun to our head. The line item veto here was adopted by the state of Minnesota in 1876. And in the ensuing 141 years, no governor has used this line item veto this way, and for good reason, because it so obviously violates the separation of powers.
The legislature can come in for funding from this court for its critical core functions, not for its appropriation, which I think is much larger than its critical core function cost. The legislature is always protected by the underlying constitutional right to perform its function, and the state must fund it, but not at the level of appropriation, but at the level of critical core function.
So taking it further, if the Supreme Court decided that all the Ramsey County judges over the last 17 years were wrong, and we can't fund anything, this is a strictly political fight, wouldn't your position be problematic with regard to the line item veto?
It would be very distasteful for sure, but I think it would be legal. I think the veto would be legal.
So the government, the legislature could be shut down by the governor if there was no mechanism for emergency funding?
No, it can't be shut down. It can be denied an appropriation. The legislature can deny the governor an appropriation. The governor can veto an appropriation, thereby denying it to the legislature or the court. That doesn't leave them without funding, because then they come, as they've come 3 times in the last 17 years, to the court to say, we have to perform our constitutional obligations, and we can't do it without funding.
So you're assuming that the court's role to provide emergency funding is going to be legal in every circumstance, similar to what we've had in the past and today?
Yes.
Several weeks ago, we brought you a conversation with Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka about the accomplishments of the past legislative session. Here's a portion of that discussion. Many Capitol observers are pointing to your leadership this session as a key reason so much bipartisan work was done. Will you continue to play this sort of peacemaking role that you've had?
Yeah, it's sort of my temperament. You know, I like to build bridges. I'm a better bridge builder than a bomb thrower. And so in the Senate, we had 34. The opposite side had 33, so we had a 1-vote majority. It forced somebody like me to rise up, and so it's the perfect time for me. I respect the governor. We don't always agree, but I definitely respect him, and so we talked very candidly about all kinds of issues. That's how I think we got most of the bills to the final finish line. I'll keep doing that. I think the governor will too, and working the House, the Senate, and the governor this time around, we got a lot done. Minnesotans should be proud of all the things we got done.
If you were addressing a group of middle-income Minnesotans, what accomplishments would you underline for this session?
Well, for sure the tax bill, and if you're a senior, we exempted Social Security income for them. If you're a small business or a farmer that's in the middle income, small business got a business property tax relief, ag got an ag property tax relief. And so the tax bill really was aimed at middle America, middle Minnesota, and so that was a really big thing. A lot of people are complaining about our roads and bridges. We got our first ever or biggest ever roads and bridges bill that was done, help people travel, go wherever they want to do. We got real ID for people, so if they want to travel to other states or go other places, they now can get on a plane and don't have to worry about that. So pretty much everywhere you looked, we did something good for them. And probably the last one was if you have health insurance and you were paying the premiums and rates were going up 67%, we actually provided relief for them as well. So a lot of different things were done for them that I think that they will greatly appreciate.
And what about for college students? What can they look forward to?
So the 2 things that the students got is, number one, as they acquire student loans, they're going to be able to get a $500 per year credit on their student loans, which is a big, big thing when you're having to pay those back. And then higher ed, we increased the funding for higher education, but we also made them hold the line on what the tuition is going to be in the future. So both ways, we did some really good things for them.
When the session began, your caucus moved up the deadlines in order to bring transparency to the process. In the end, a lot was done behind closed doors, and those budget bills were getting to the floor without a lot of time for everybody to read them. So in the future, what more can be done so that Minnesotans have the transparency in the process that they're looking for?
Well, first of all, this is the first year I was majority leader, and I wish the end hadn't been so hectic. It's hard to explain, but when you're 34, 33, it's really difficult. And we had 2 senators who had a parent die, so we had to, any of those days we couldn't do any work because we only had 33 when they were gone. We had another senator that was sick, had a heart attack, and had stints and had to come vote 2 days later. So all of that made it difficult. But the key thing that I advocated from the very beginning is that we have targets early. The targets are, what does the House, Senate, and Governor agree we're going to spend in each area? And we couldn't get those until, I believe, the Friday before the final session at the end of Monday night. We needed those 2 weeks ahead of time. That was what we were advocating for, and I still will, because then you have all that time to negotiate, 2 weeks of time instead of just a few days.
Governor Dayton expressed concern, in particular with the tax bill, that it will jeopardize the state's fiscal health into the future. Are you confident that the state can afford the size of the tax bill?
Yeah, so it was the biggest tax bill in 18 years. But what I would say is when you look at how much was actually tax relief, it was a little over 400 million, under 500, over 400. And we figured that in the next 4 years, that would be about $1 billion of actual revenue decrease, tax relief. Spending in the next 4 years will go up $6 billion. So I've made the case that it's not about the tax relief we gave. If we have a problem with our budgets in the future, it will be because spending continues to increase at rates that are hard to control. HHS is growing at a rate of 20%, but overall it was growing 9%. So the small tax relief we gave compared to the spending increases that's the issue. It's not the tax relief, it's spending. And so that's my case. I thought we should give some back, so we gave it to seniors, farmers, small business owners, we gave it to students and others. But it wasn't a huge number.
Well, speaking of health and human services, that area of the state budget is expected to continue to grow into the future, and funding generally falls below the demand. So if this is a trend for the future, how, as a state, can that be managed?
Well, without a doubt, this will be the most complex area that we have to deal with. I mentioned it's growing 20%. We can't sustain that, and yet we have an age wave coming that the costs are only going to go up. And so add to that the federal government is likely going to cut $1 billion or more from Minnesota's money we get from the feds, and we have a real problem. And so a couple of things. One, I've set up a subcommittee with Senator Jensen and Senator Klein. They're both doctors. I said, what are some of the things that are truly driving up cost in Minnesota? I'd rather people that are actually in it day in and day out to begin to explore where can we save money, but also how we deliver care to people that require MA or any of the different programs that we administer. Do we need to do them different? And I was out in DC last week and had a chance to visit with Secretary Price, HHS Secretary, and he said he wants states to reform, he wants states to lead the way, and that they will give waivers much easier for states to improvise and try new things. And so it's going to be a big deal. I've told the governor I think this is the biggest thing we're going to have to work on next year and probably the year after and the year after. But we're aiming to do that. I'm excited that we have the opportunity to try.
There appeared to be a desire this session to ease regulations to aid job growth. When looking back, will this session be one that businesses will appreciate?
Well, the tax structure that we changed will help businesses. The roads and bridges that we're going to fund now will help roads and bridges. We did some reforms on education, getting more of the best teachers in front of the students, which will help create the people that they're going to have employees for jobs. So I would say overall they would say it was a very good year. Regulations is something we're always going to have to look at, both federally and on a state level. I feel we could do a lot more there. Just one example, Polymet, it's the copper nickel mine, and I think it's been over 15 years of permitting to actually do what they want to do. There was somebody in the Historical Society that was actually holding up that permit, and so the governor, the House and Senate agreed that we needed to change that little thing and move it into some other areas so that there was more accountability and more freedom to flow as far as getting permits done. So simple things like that we're working on, but they're harder to do than people can imagine.
Last question. If you erase the final squabble here at the end, how would you rate this legislative session? Was there good bipartisan compromise?
Absolutely was. And I would say, I told the governor, we all should be taking a victory lap about what we did, because it was Republicans in the House and Senate, but the governor signed on to those bills. And so we had reforms in education with over $1 billion of new funding. Roads and bridges got done, Real ID got done, tax relief got done. I mean, everywhere you looked, something good happened for Minnesota. And so that would be something we should all be proud of. I hope it's just a hiccup. I think we'll get through it. But we showed that bipartisan efforts really can make a difference.
Senator Loehrke, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
You bet.
One piece of the rationale for the injunction to continue funding the state legislature is the desire to maintain the state's stellar credit rating by making continued lease payments on the new award-winning Minnesota Senate building.
The award for excellence, as well as the 2017 Project of the Year to Mortensen Construction for the Minnesota Senate building.
Well, the award is a fantastic recognition of the project and the design-build process, and the design-build was just critical for this process. We started with a tight timeline to begin with. This was an integral part of the Capitol restoration, with tenants moving out of the Capitol and needing a place to go. We had some delays, obviously, with the challenges to the project, and it was still delivered on time. So to win a design build award, which is one of the processes we use to build construction not only well, but to do it quickly, this is a fantastic award.
Design build is a different type of delivery model that really puts trust at the center of the relationship and the contractual relationship between the owner, the architect, and the contractor. It really shifts focus to teamwork and integrated team principles, much more so than contractual barriers that are in other types of delivery methods. And with design build, you can start procuring different bid packages and different scopes of work earlier. You can be building as you're continuing to design, and that was a key element to be able to deliver this project in a really, really short window. We delivered the project within 15 months of breaking ground and within about 20 months of starting design, which is incredible when you think about the scope of this project. This project was really a great team approach with the designers who are on our team, BWBR in St. Paul, with Picard Chilton actually on the East Coast, offering a lot of expertise, to the over 50 companies that worked on our project together as a team to put this together. We had over 375,000 worker hours on the project, and these things don't happen without a very, very good team-centered focus. And it was an amazing team approach. And what we're also proud of is that it was a Minnesota funded building, it was a Minnesota fabricated building, it was a Minnesota built building, where we utilized the people from Minnesota to build it. The state of Minnesota led this. They selected design build, and they selected a team that was integrated in nature, and they were all in that integrated principle. They were a great teammate of ours, they were a great customer. Very, very fair, very hard at times, and made sure that everybody towed the line. And at the end of the day, we all did, and we all worked together in a great way. And this is the outcome, which is very, very positive.
The important thing to remember, I think, is that this project is an integral part of the Capitol grand opening. We're going to be celebrating the grand opening of the restored Capitol this August 11th, 12th, and 13th. And the reality is that this is about the people of Minnesota being able to access their government for the next 100 years and to be able to do that efficiently. And so this project goes hand in hand with the integration into the Capitol restoration. It was an essential part of it. And so to be able to be recognized for this project in that regard, I think, is a really important part of Minnesota's history and a recognition of the work that Minnesotans do.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.